It's all good. Good evening, students. Good evening, parents. Good evening, community. Good evening, friends. On behalf of Connecticut High School, my name is Mark Sidman. I'm the assistant principal here at the high school. At this time, I'd like to encourage everybody to please stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag Please remain standing for a moment of silence just to reflect on why we're here this evening. Thank you. You may be seated. This evening's presentation is being hosted by our Drug and Alcohol Task Force. All right, this was a committee spearheaded by our assistant principal, Joseph Modica, last spring. Joseph is standing next to me on my right, your left. Joe really is the impetus behind getting this committee going, and that's why we're here this evening, because one of the things that we so much value are the lives of our students, of course, our family, and our friends. We're fortunate this evening to have the Assistant District Attorney's Office here, and we'll introduce them in a moment. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Joseph Modica.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone, for coming. This is a very important presentation. Just to talk about the task force a little bit, we started last March with about maybe 12 members. Now we're up to over 20. You look at all the partnerships outside that we have now, they're now part of the task force as well, so it's growing. Our goal is to educate students and parents on drug awareness, intervention, alcohol, stuff like that, and we're doing it through a lot of committees. Programs are entering into schools. We go to the elementary schools and teach them about being kind and courteous and being a role model. And the high schools, we get a little more serious. But we have a ton of programs we're implementing throughout the year, and it's a great job we're doing. I want to thank the task force for being here. Let's give them a round of applause. They're a big asset to the committee as well. If you want to just scan the QR code, that's our website, the task force website. Please follow that. There's a lot of resources on there for parents and students. And we're also on the district website under the mental health tab. But definitely look at the website. There's a lot of programs, resources, upcoming events that the task force is promoting. So before we get started, I just want to show a quick video to get this presentation started.
Nurses being on top of it, they save the student's life.
New Rochelle Superintendent Jonathan Raymond calling it an ominous moment at New Rochelle High School. Midday Monday, a student used a vaping device to take a hit of marijuana concentrate and quickly showed signs of distress. It's believed the concentrate was contaminated with the powerful opioid fentanyl.
That's why we need to get this message out, to our families, caregivers and our guardians. They need to know that, and tell their kids that anytime you try anything from the street, whether it's marijuana or off of a vape, chances are it's going to be laced with fentanyl. That's how bad, that's how serious this is.
Luckily, all school nurses in New Rochelle have a supply of Narcan, which quickly reverses the effects of opioid exposure. The student was given Narcan and stabilized.
It was absolutely shocking. I was just really glad that the nurses had the Narcan on hand.
Parent Mary Monzone has 2 students at the high school.
It's terrifying. And again, I'm just so grateful that this didn't end in a death of a child. Unbelievable.
The district worried more students may have access to the possibly contaminated vape cartridges and warning parents, talk to your children about the dangers. In New Rochelle, Tony Ayala,
this is why we're
CBS
here.
2 News.
I want to just
Good evening. My name is John Scalato. This is Nick Maggio. We are prosecutors with the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office. On behalf of the DA's office, on behalf of the District Attorney, Raymond Tierney, we'd like to thank Connecticut School District, in particular Mark Sidman and Joseph Modica. I thought, you had a difficult time with my last name. For having us here today and for organizing this presentation. I also like to thank the parents and the students who are here today. This is a very important topic. If you are here today, it's probably because you are concerned about fentanyl, and you should be. Last year, approximately 300 people died from an overdose regarding fentanyl, and that was only the first 10 months of last year. We're still waiting for the data for the months of November and December. So we're averaging 30 deaths a month as a result of a drug overdose. There was approximately 1,500 non-fatal overdoses. And the reason why those 1,500 is not a lower number and the 300 a higher number is because of the men and women of our fire departments, our ambulance corps, and the men and women of law enforcement. Our first responders are the first ones at the scene. They're applying Narcan. They are truly lifesavers, and they deserve our praise and our thanks. If you're like me, a parent, you are, you're there for the birth of your child. You are present for their first words. You observe their first steps. You cry when you put them on the bus for their first day of school. You cry even more when they graduate from high school and maybe college. And then, you walk your daughter down the aisle, or you have that first dance with your son, and they start their own family. But you never stop worrying as a parent. You never stop, thinking. You never stop protecting them. There is no expiration date on being a parent. It's not a milk carton. So you're always concerned about their safety. You're always concerned about their welfare. During my time in the Narcotics Bureau, I've met a number of families who have lost loved ones as a result of overdoses. I could tell you this, and this really for the students out there. When I met with these parents on their child's birthday, there was no cake, there was no presents. You want to know where the parents were on their child's birthday? They were at a cemetery, standing over the grave of their child, wishing him a happy birthday. Christmas, there's no tree, there's no presents. Again, the parents were at the cemetery, standing over the grave of a child that they just lost to an overdose fentanyl. Now, I'm sorry to be morbid, but this is the reality. Drugs not only hurt you, they hurt those around you. They hurt your parents, they hurt your family members. You can no longer say, that can never happen to my kid. You can no longer say, there's no drugs in my school. You can no longer say there's no drugs in my community, because that's not the reality. The reality is there's drugs everywhere. And this is a step, the first step, in protecting yourself and protecting your children from overdosing. Okay, the first slide I want to show, or we want to show, is a 911 call from a case here in Suffolk County. So again, that is a real 911 call of a dad here in Suffolk County. And if we play that just to show you, this is reality. You know, this is not television. There's no actors. It's reality. And here you have a parent who sat and watched as his child died right in front of him as a result of an overdose from fentanyl. So why is drugs such a problem here in Suffolk County? You know, I've talked to people who are familiar with New York, but you know, whether they live off the island, and they think, oh, Suffolk County, oh, they're all way out there. You know, they're way out there in the boonies. No one, you know, nothing's ever happened there, and that's not the reality. The reality is, because Suffolk County is such close proximity to New York City, that's where our drugs are coming from. You know, we've dealt with cases where drug dealers travel from Suffolk, they go into Queens, they go into Brooklyn, they go into the Bronx. Like I said, they go into the city, they turn around, they come right back out here. They buy the drugs in Queens County, or like I said, they buy the drugs in Suffolk, in the city, at a cheap price. You know, a kilo of cocaine, you know, could go for simply $19,000, $20,000 in New York City. You bring that out here, and you can start selling that for well over $30,000, $40,000 after you chop it up. So our proximity to New York City does become a problem. Again, our drug dealers travel from here into the city, and we have also drug dealers coming from the city into Suffolk County because it's such close proximity.
And the drugs that are coming from the city are different. One of the main ones that we're seeing is crack and cocaine, which has certainly been around for a while. But the main problem that we're seeing with it now is that it's never what it purports to be. The drugs that people are often trying to buy are usually never what they purport to be. Cocaine is one of those. We prosecute hundreds of cases where people are trying to make deals for cocaine, and they might get that, but it's getting cut with fentanyl, and that's where we're seeing overdoses. One of the big problems, too, is that it's nearly impossible to tell when you're getting a pure substance that you're negotiating for or one that's laced with fentanyl. And just as a for instance, I mean, what you're seeing here is what people who are buying and selling drugs are seeing. You know, they're getting baggy with some product in it. They think it's one thing, and meanwhile, it's something completely else, something completely different, something that'll kill them. And that's the scariest thing. And it's not just cocaine, it's everything. You saw the video earlier with vape pens, where you're dealing with a liquid cartridge. You can't tell what's in that. You'll see later on in the presentation, pills are another big one, where people are prescribed medications, and maybe they can't access those medications, but they still need them, and so they turn to the streets to get them, and then they don't turn out to be what they thought they were, and then they end up overdosing. So just as a for instance, on your right-hand side, what you're seeing is powdered cocaine. And just as an idea for a frame of reference, you could see a penny in the background. That's a substantial amount of cocaine. Now pay attention to that penny and keep it in mind for the next time you see a penny in this slide. And you know, the drug problems are afflicting all sorts of people in our community. It's not just people who have long-term drug abuse problems and addictions and are turning to the street. I mean, these are affecting some of the most upstanding, highly regarded, well-accomplished people in our community, West Point cadets, who are in some of their peak physical condition at the time, you know, young folks aspiring to join the military, and they make one decision and they end up with a fentanyl overdose. That's the scariest thing, that it could be anybody.
Where are my student athletes? Okay, student athletes. I mean, you guys are probably in, you know, great shape. But just because you're in great shape does not mean that you're immune to fentanyl. We had, not too long ago, we had a student athlete who was I believe, a freshman in college. Came home for a break, hooked up with some of his old buddies, took a pill that he thought was one thing, turned out to be another, and his parents found him dead the next morning. Again, this was a student athlete in the best condition of his life. Just because you are an athlete does not mean you're immune to fentanyl. Does not mean that you could say to yourself, I'm tough enough, I'm strong enough. That can't happen to me. It's just the opposite.
And this just goes back to the point that I was making before, that we're seeing it in everything. You know, I have a little brother who's in high school, and you know, we talk, and he shares with me Snapchat videos of his kids that he's going to school with and what they're doing, and I'm always seeing the videos that kids are posting about, you know, doing vapes in school, and it makes me worried for him, and I do my best to impress on him just how dangerous it is to be around that stuff. You know, vapes were touted to be this safer alternative, and it's just nicotine, it's just water vapor, and you get to flavor them. Well, that's not always the case. You know, it just keeps going back to the point that you never know what you're getting. And these are just more articles. It's popping up everywhere, not just the island. It's really across the country, whether it's in Tennessee or up in New Rochelle or wherever.
Recently, I read a couple of articles on vaping, and you know, it's the same tragedy. You know, a kid down in Georgia who now can't use his arm because of a fentanyl overdose from vaping. There was a student down, a 12-year-old, I believe it was, might have been Florida or Georgia also, you know, who's lucky to be alive today, who after overdosing went into a coma. And you know, when he came out of the coma, one of the first things he said as a 12-year-old is that he felt peer pressure. And you know, for the students here today, you cannot succumb to peer pressure. If your friends are doing drugs, they're no friends of yours. You know, as a kid, listen, I was in the same position that, you know, all the students here. I grew up with a close group of friends. And then at a certain point in high school, you know, there you come to a fork in the road. Some of my friends started to go the route of drugs. I decided it's time to make new friends. Just because your friends do it doesn't make it cool, it doesn't make it right. It still makes it stupid.
And so this goes back to the earlier point about it not being what you thought it was. You know, there are folks that are otherwise prescribed medications that they could procure, Xanax, Adderall, oxycodone, things that are meant to treat, you know, diagnosable conditions. And when people can no longer get those because their prescription ran out or what have you, they can't get to the doctor, they turn to the streets. And this is what they're getting. I mean, you know, the folks that are manufacturing these drugs are making them the same color, putting the right markings on them, putting the right lettering on them, making them the same shape and size. I mean, at this point, it's really becoming a sort of poison where they know that it's not what they're saying it is, and they're making it look like what the person who wants to buy it thinks it is. And they're not just a couple of pills that we're getting in our cases either. I mean, these are sizable seizures that we're getting here. You know, each one of those pills could be an overdose for a Suffolk County resident. And that's the really scary thing. And the people who bought those things wouldn't be any the wiser for it. They wouldn't be able to tell based on the color or the smell. It's an odorless compound, the taste. There's nothing that'll tell them what it is before it's too late. And it's coming in all shapes and forms. You know, the press cocaine is one as well. You never know. You never know. It's in everything. You know, these past few slides are just to demonstrate about how pervasive it is. And heroin too. You know, heroin, we don't see as much heroin anymore. One of the reasons is that heroin is on a growth cycle. And so there are times where heroin is prevalent and it can be distributed and times when it can't. You know, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, which means it could be created at any time of the year. And that's why, and it's a lot cheaper to produce than heroin as well. And so that's why we're seeing fentanyl take over for heroin. You know, when people are trying to buy heroin on the streets, they're hardly ever really getting it. They're really just getting pure fentanyl. Remember I told you to keep in mind the next time you saw the penny? That's a lethal dose of fentanyl right there. You know, compared to the amount of powdered cocaine you saw earlier in the presentation, that's what can kill somebody right there. So imagine that being pressed up and colored blue to match a pill, or in a white powder like cocaine, or in a tan powder like heroin. You can't tell. You cannot tell.
Sadly, we've been seeing more cases of kids under the age of 1 dying of a fentanyl overdose. Why? Well, you see the amount that it takes. And what do we know about kids, right? Where are their hands always? Always putting it in their mouths. So a small crumb that you see here next to the penny, if a child puts their hands onto a small crumb and put that hand into their mouth, they're going to overdose. So it's you know, almost hard to believe that that amount can put you in the ground, but that's the reality.
And that just goes to show, you know, to give a demonstrative piece of information for you for what it looks like and how much it actually takes. So what is it? So it's a highly potent painkiller, you know, 80 to 100 times stronger than morphine. Came about in the 60s, and it was meant for end-of-life care. So fentanyl has legitimate uses under the direction of trained and licensed professionals. At the time that, you know, fentanyl is in the conversation in medical care, like the slide says, it's for an end-of-life care. And at the time they're administering it to an individual, it is diluted tens and hundreds and thousands of times by other, you know, non-opiate compounds to dilute the effect of it, where that's not taking place, you know, with drug dealers on the street here. Where does it come from? So, like I said, it's synthetically made. You know, the meaning or the importance of that is that it could come at all times of the year. You know, heroin, like I said, is on a growth cycle, so there are times where it could be harvested and distributed and times where it can't. Fentanyl doesn't have that limitation on it. It is a constant and steady flow into the drug stream in our communities. It is cheaper to make and produce than heroin. It is highly addictive. And so that's why we're seeing the swell of it in the drug systems out here. And what we're seeing here is what we call precursors, or the chemicals that are used to create fentanyl, coming from overseas and coming into America here. People will then use those precursors, use those compounds to make fentanyl. And oftentimes we're seeing those precursors in cocaine and heroin and pressed pills and things of that nature, indicating to us that things are either getting cross-contaminated or folks are just putting these compounds themselves in the drugs as well. You know, the reason it's so dangerous is because it could kill you. At the end of the day, it'll kill you. If it's not, if somebody isn't, you know, on top of you with Narcan, if someone isn't there to call a medical professional, it'll kill you. It'll slow down your respiratory system, cause you to be unable to breathe, cause issues with your circulatory system as well. And one of the real dangers of it, as with any opioid, is that even if you survive the overdose, it's still a highly addictive substance that could really alter your brain chemistry. And so that takes its own form of treatment as well. And it's impossible, you know, it's impossible to tell what it is. You know, John before was mentioning that we're seeing the uptick in the overdoses of children, of toddlers. So even when folks are mixing this fentanyl, it's getting on substances that or surfaces that people are otherwise using, whether it's a floor, a counter, a chair, whatever. And that's what makes it so dangerous, is its inability to be detected and how it could be in anything. Everywhere. You know, there's no such thing as safe recreational drug use. That's how you keep yourself safe, is by not doing anything.
That's right. Happy birthday, Callie. Callie's eating his birthday breakfast. What do you have for breakfast today, Callie?
You're so cute. How old are you? 32.
Right, as you can see from that last video, you know, those could be anybody's parents. The person overdosed could be anybody's child. It's a person who, again, thought they were taking something, thought they were taking oxycodone, again, to whether alleviate the stress or an injury, and it turned out to be something that wasn't. All right, this slide is just to give you an idea of what fentanyl, on one of the occasions of what fentanyl looks like. You know, it's this nice rainbow color, right? It looks like Skittles. And it becomes attractive to sometimes young kids because a young child sees the rainbow colors and their first reaction is, ooh, candy. It's anything but. So we're seeing fentanyl come in different colors now. This was a seizure that we had here in Suffolk County, and this is fentanyl in a powdered form before it's pressed, and it comes in a purple color. We're finding even in the jail that you're not, you know, even as inmates, you're not safe from fentanyl. And we had a recent case where a defendant from outside of the jail was infusing fentanyl onto paper. They were making fentanyl into a liquid form, spraying it onto pieces of paper, and then having those pieces of paper delivered to, you know, whether it was a boyfriend or a girlfriend or husband or wife, someone, an inmate in the jail. You know, that was, you know, the jail is intercepting, you know, every day drugs that are being snuck in. And defendants are getting more and more creative. You know, it used to just be, well, let's just sew it to, you know, the bottom of the sweatpants and deliver it to the jail and say, oh, this is for inmate so-and-so. And, you know, the correction officers and the sheriff's office was finding that the drugs were sewn into clothing. And then it moved to, well, you know, we'll put it in magazines. And we'll, you know, again, we'll spray it into magazines. And again, sheriffs and the correction officers, you know, found out about that. And now it's, you know, putting it on legal papers. And you know, if you're a sheriff, if you're a correction officer, and you know papers are being delivered to the jail and they're legal papers, you know, you're not going to think that, oh, this is probably, you know, drugs. But what's happening is that they are, again, spraying fentanyl onto the paper, and then they would take those papers and they would rip it off, you know, a little piece of it, and they put it in their mouth, and now the saliva with the fentanyl on the paper is what's getting them their high. This is a photo of a press pill. And sadly, you go on the internet and buy press pills. And this is how our drug dealers are easily converting fentanyl into a pill form. They're going on the internet, buying a pill press, and making it themselves. And it's relatively that simple. We're also seeing not just fentanyl, but we're also seeing a couple of new drugs, xylazine and nitazine. Just to give you an idea of what these drugs are. When the dealers are selling their product, again, sometimes it's a mixture of cocaine and either fentanyl, or it could be cocaine and nitazine, cocaine and xylazine, cocaine and carfentanil. It could be heroin mixed with any of those drugs. And you know, we've been talking a little bit about fentanyl. Nitazine is 1,000 times more powerful than morphine. And I think we had said earlier that fentanyl was probably about 100 times more powerful than morphine. This is 1,000 times more potent, nitazine. Xylazine. Xylazine is an anesthesia for horses, for cattle. You may have seen it on the news. It's also got the nickname Trank. And if you see a person who takes xylazine, they walk around like they're a zombie. Again, this is a sedative for animals, and people are ingesting them, not knowing it. Fentanyl. Fentanyl is another drug that we're seeing mixed with either cocaine or with heroin. Fentanyl is an anesthesia for elephants, for rhinoceros, for giraffes, and yet people are ingesting them, putting them in their body. Now, are they doing it intentionally? They're putting the drug in their body intentionally, but do they know what they're putting in? No. But dealers are mixing these products into the cocaine, into the heroin, so their clients get the better feel, and the results are deadly. For fentanyl, for nitazine, carfentanil, Narcan helps with the reverse of it. But for a drug like xylazine, that Trank drug, that's used for horses and cattle, there's no reversal for that one. Before I show the next slide, I'm going to give you a fair warning that it is graphic. It's something that you may want to turn your heads, but this is the result of a drug that has xylazine in it. Sadly, I've seen people who have those open wounds, who required surgery to mend that. This is what people are putting into their body. And again, they don't know it. But you have to be careful, which is, again, why we're up here talking about this, is that you don't know what you're putting into your body. And this, is one of the results. So we talked a little bit about where these drugs are coming from. The close proximity to New York City. Here's a recent search warrant of Suffolk County. And if you think that these drug dealers are sitting in a nice laboratory that's clean, they're wearing gloves, and well, that they are, because they know how potent it is, but they're in a clean, sterile environment, no. This is the environment that they're making drugs in. It doesn't make a difference if it drops on the floor and it falls into, there's hair on it or any other garbage that's lying around. This is the location where drugs are being manufactured. Now, I know, if I drop something on the floor, there's always the 5-second rule. That's my house, and I don't even feel comfortable with that. These are the conditions where drugs are being made, and again, people are putting them into their body.
And so, as a resident of Suffolk County, as a parent, sibling, whatever relationship you have with somebody, the question becomes, well, what do you do? And one of the best answers that you could do is learn to identify what fentanyl does to your body, how to spot an overdose so that you can get in touch with a medical professional quickly or administer Narcan quickly. So again, fentanyl is an opiate. It's meant for end-of-life care, and it's a depressant. So the signs of somebody having consumed fentanyl are going to be that they slow down their breathing and respiratory system, that they might start to be nauseous or vomit. Sweating, shaking, depression, weight loss from a more long-term fentanyl abuse problem, and other signs of an overdose as well. You're seeing discoloration in the fingernails, the lips can turn blue, they'll be confused, constricted pupils, limp and unresponsive. They'll just completely collapse too. And so the reason that learning these signs are important is so that you can help in either call 911 to make sure that a first responder is brought onto the scene, or in the event that you have Narcan yourself, you could work to administer that to the individual as well.
But what I want to add is, even before we get to the signs of a fentanyl overdose, is the signs that someone is addicted to drugs. You know, if you're seeing your child having academic problems, if you're seeing, you went from an A student down to a D student, if you see that your child is having mood swings, these sudden angry outbursts, if you see that they're withdrawn from the family, that they're no longer looking to participate in any family gathering, if their appearance seems to be unhealthy, then you need to start seriously thinking about questioning your child and finding your child some help. There is a law in New York called the Good Samaritan Law. Can you just go right to the... So the Good Samaritan Law covers witnesses and victims of a drug or alcohol overdose. What it's designed to do is that if you are present when a person is overdosing, what was happening was that person was not calling 911 because they were afraid that if they call 911 and the police arrive at the house and the police see the drugs, that they were going to get arrested. And so they weren't calling 911, and they were letting the person who OD'd just die. Again, more out of concern for themselves. So New York State passed the Good Samaritan Law, which, in a nutshell, to summarize it, is that if a person is overdosing and you are present and you call 911, you will not be charged with the drugs that are found in the house. And again, it's designed to help. It's designed to make sure that the person who's overdosing gets the help that they need without concern for your own, incarceration. Fentanyl, it's not just dangerous ingesting it. It's dangerous just being present airborne. There have been cases where police officers on traffic stops, and again, this just shows the dangers of their jobs, police officers on traffic stops who end up having to be, Narcaned because drugs in the car was fentanyl, and it came in contact with their skin. Canines. If they're sniffing out drugs, even the canines can overdose on fentanyl, because once it's in the air and you're breathing it, it's not something that just has to be smoked. It's not something that you could just inject with a needle. If it's airborne and you breathe it in, you can overdose. And as I said earlier, drug dealers are smart enough to protect themselves. They wear masks, they wear gloves. They know how dangerous this is. You should too know how dangerous this is. I think the last slide is questions. Before we open it up, so what are we doing? What else are we doing to combat this epidemic? Recently, we had had the privilege of traveling to Albany with the district attorney, and he is attempting to pass legislation in New York State. And amongst those legislations is, you probably read in the paper or seen on the news, the words bail reform. Right now, if a person sells drugs, sells fentanyl, and gets arrested, they cannot be held on bail. There are certain exceptions, but for the most part, they cannot be held on bail. So one of the proposals that our office is making is that if you get caught selling fentanyl, you should be eligible to be held on bail instead of being released and going back out the next day and selling. Because that's what we're finding, is that bad guys are out there selling drugs, selling fentanyl, getting arrested, and there's nothing we can do in holding them in jail. They're getting released, and they're back on the street that same day or the next day, once again selling. Another proposal that we're making is what's called death by dealer, that if you sell fentanyl and that leads to the overdose of another person, that we should be able to prosecute you for manslaughter. Right now, we cannot charge you with anything if you sell drugs to another person that results in a death. The only thing we can charge you with is selling the drugs to them, which doesn't carry the same punishment as if a person was charged with causing that death. We are also, right now, another proposal is that family members who lost a loved one to an overdose, sometimes they're unable to pay for funeral costs. We are looking to, there's something called the New York State Crime Victims Board. New York State Crime Victims Board allows or provides money to victims of crimes, whether it's to pay for maybe medical expenses, or if a person does die as a result of, let's say, a shooting or a stabbing, helps pay for funeral costs. The crime board does not recognize people who die of an overdose as a victim. We're looking to change that so they could get a proper burial. We're not just all about, putting bad guys in jail, because we do realize that you can't arrest your way out of this problem, out of this epidemic. So we do consent when a person's arrested to drug courts, drug treatments, where appropriate. And I say where appropriate because sometimes the drug dealers are able to manipulate the system and getting into these drug courts where in the end their charges end up getting reduced if they successfully complete it. But we have a different variety of treatment plans out there, treatment courts out there, that we do, again, where appropriate. If we see that you're an addict, we know that jail is not the right avenue for you. So what we do, so we put you, or we recommend, it's usually, again, up to them if they're looking for the help, but we will place you into some of these courts and get the treatment that you need. And the last thing that we've done are presentations like this. We go into a lot of the middle schools, high schools. We go into the health, usually it's the health teachers that reach out. And we usually, whatever how long the period is, but we sit and we talk to the students and again, tell them exactly how dangerous this is. Because it is, and I cannot emphasize enough that, especially for the kids out there, the worst thing you can do is break your parents' heart. And ingesting drugs, overdosing, without even getting that far dramatic, just getting yourself arrested is going to break your parents' heart. And that's the last thing you ever want to do to a parent. I've looked into the eyes, I've looked into the faces of parents who lost loved ones. They'll never recover. And that's not something that you want to do to your parents. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Questions on how kids can avoid peer pressure. For example, they go into the bathroom and they're passing around a vape or card or whatever you call it, things of that nature. How can they get out of that situation immediately? What could they say without being bullied or made fun of?
Sure. Thanks for the question. This is a conversation that I've had with my little brother, who's in high school too, and he's around, those kids. Those kids are having those conversations. He sees in his Snapchats, and at the end of the day, I tell him, it comes down to a choice. You got to choose what you want. You got to choose who you're going to be. You got to choose who you are. And you got to choose whether or not you're going to be the kid who takes the risks and just to look cool in the moment and then ends up dying, or then ends up getting a drug addiction. Or you got to be the kid who makes the choice to set himself apart from what everybody else is doing and chooses to remain safe. And look, you might catch some flack for that. The kids that you're with might poke fun at you, might say, you don't got to be so scared, come on, there's nothing to worry about. And there are two things with that. One, sometimes those kids also don't know what they got. They think that their brother gave it to them or they got it from somewhere and it's safe and it's fine and they don't mean to harm you, but they don't know. They don't know what's in those drugs, and that's one of the things that makes these so dangerous. And the other thing too is that if they're going to be the kids that are going to poke at you for not following what they're doing or taking the risks or what have you, those aren't the kids you want to be around. That's what John was saying before, that you got to make a choice, and you got to make the choice to be the bigger person, the one who's able to deal with it, and the one who gets to walk away from those situations. Because if you make the other choice, you might not be the kid who walks away from those situations. And you might be in one of these slides on the next presentation that we're doing. Yes?
Is there a chance? I mean, I guess there's always a chance for anything. I mean, it's a difficult question to answer because, I'm not sure how those inside of those dispensaries work. I don't know where they're getting their product from. I also don't know if they're cutting corners themselves. But, we have seen it in marijuana. Now, it's a question is where did they get it from? Someone might have bought it from a dispensary and then played around with it afterwards. So, the simplest thing is just don't do drugs. Yes. I believe there is a test. I'm not familiar with it. I have, seen whether news reports about it or an article on it, but yes, I don't, have you? Yeah, I'm not too familiar with it, but I have seen or read something on there being home tests. Someone, yes. In what sense? We have not seen in our office anything with, laced, fentanyl being in alcohol. I would like to think that anyone under the age of 21 is not drinking anyway. All the way in the back? Well, I know of the police department's training of Narcan, and I know there are other, because we've seen in other presentations where there are other organizations whose, I just can't think of off the top of my head. But yes, we have seen more and more organizations doing Narcan training, giving out samples of Narcan for, because you never know. Anybody else? Yeah, when we went up to Albany, the Nassau District Attorney was also present. The city, I don't know if I was not involved in, I could tell you the city DAs were not present. For whatever reason, I don't know whether they decided not to or whether they were asked or not. Yeah, you would think that it would be that easy, but I don't delve into the world of politics, so I'm not even going to touch that one a little. Anybody else? Yes. Two-part question, or? If you go outside to one of the tables, they're probably better suited to tell you where you can pick those up. Anything else? Anybody else? Yes.
You know, unfortunately, marijuana has been legalized. And as a substance abuse counselor, there is fentanyl in marijuana joints, blunts, and such. How, and also that it is a gateway drug. And I know a lot of people do argue about that. But how could we make the kids understand of today, purchasing marijuana, they don't know what's in it, until something, dreadful happens. And I see a lot of people these days taking this, so lightly because it's legalized. And it's really scary because they can buy it in the store, sell it to a kid, add something to it. And again, trying to work on prevention for the children so that no unfortunate circumstances happen. How can we do that as parents, as people of the community? How can we, do some sort of prevention or warning about marijuana, that it's just marijuana, when most of the time it's just not?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the parents, at least when it comes to kids, really are the first line of defense against this stuff. There was a time where, a kid would make a choice and the parent would find out about it, and then they'd sit down and have a conversation in the living room or at the kitchen table or whatever, and you would tell them about the dangers and the worries and the fears and the problems. And what's really scary now is that sometimes parents aren't even getting the chance to have that conversation because by the time the kid makes the choice, it's too late, right? And so I would say, as a parent, you got to be having these conversations in a proactive way. You can't wait until there's an event or something already happens to be having that talk. You got to get ahead of it. And the best thing that you can do is be informed, stay informed, come to events like this, do your research online, and then have the talk with the kid. Sit them down. There's a colleague of mine that I work with who's got two little girls who they weren't at the appropriate grade level to be coming in and getting the benefit of this talk. So he took the presentation home with him and gave it to his girls. Just to get ahead of it, to have that conversation with them, to open that line of communication. Because it goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that by the time that kid makes that choice, it might be the last choice that they make, in those peer pressure groups. And so I would say the best thing that you can do as a parent, as a friend, as a colleague, is try and get ahead of it. Be informed, give them the information, let them know that there's no such thing as safe recreational drug use. That one choice can be the last one. Anything else, or?
Just to give everybody a little sense here, and then I want to thank our ADAs in a minute. As we work here with our students and we work with the community here in Connecticut, our worst day would be having a situation where a student goes down here in school. Our reality is we do deal with vapes in school, all right? We have come across THC vapes. These are the things we deal with. We hear in the community, kids going to parties. These are realities that you cannot ignore, where they're engaging in behaviors that are questionable, all right? As far as the marijuana goes, Teresa raised a good point in the back. She works for Phoenix House. Yes, we're hearing marijuana is laced with fentanyl. All right? These people are not buying it in dispensaries. These people are buying it through illicit means. It's not legal. We don't know where they get it. We don't know what's in it. The edibles are another problem. Everybody downplays the edibles, but again, where are they being produced? What's in it? We don't know. Our fear is also for our friends and our students who are graduating. They need to make the right choices once they're out of here, because they're going to encounter different situations in college where the pill popping sometimes becomes becomes even more rampant, they don't know what they're getting. You saw the presses where they're pressing the pills? That's happening. That's the reality that the ADAs were talking about. Our law enforcement regularly encounters these things. This is only a foundational meeting. This is a first step. You know, our hope this evening was to have packed out this auditorium. And I can't tell you how pleased I am to see the people here this evening who are seated here and listening. The big challenge is, how do we get the message out to the rest of the community? How do we get our student body to recognize the dangers behind this? Once again, our nightmare as parents, as people who have friends in the room and in the community, would be to have to deal with an overdose situation where we're now at a funeral. We don't want that. We don't want that future for our kids. We don't want that future for our families. We don't want it for our friends. This is why Mr. Modica was so focused on creating the Drug Alcohol Task Force last year and causing this thing to really grow. And this is why we started this type of a meeting this evening. I'm going to, hand the mic over back to Mr. Modica. He has some closing statements he wants to make. We also have quite a few people we want to thank, because you know what? This wouldn't have happened without the support of the people who are in this community. Mr. Modica.
Thank you. Let's thank John and Nick again for their time, please. Thank you so much. So like Mark said, our goal as a task force is to programs, educate the students, educate the community. We're going to continue to have programs. If you can visit our website, I can't say it enough, visit the website. Programs are on there. They're in the schools. We're implementing them. It's great. Thanks to our partnerships. Let's give them a round of applause for coming out tonight. And please visit their tables when we leave. Get Narcan trained. Outreach is out there right now. Everyone can do it for free. Get trained right now with Narcan and take one home, and Outreach will do that for you. I want to thank you to the Anti-Bullying Club, Ms. Caputo, Ms. Martorelli, Ms. Unterweiser, for doing the game night for the kids. Let's give them a round of applause, and the students. I also want to thank our Board of Education, Ms. Mallon, Mr. Murphy, Ms. DiLorenzo, Ms. Ionelli, and Mr. Napolitano-Ferno for being here tonight. Let's give them a round of applause. Central Office, Dr. Joe Centimore, Assistant Superintendent Reza Kolahifar, Ms. Poppy, Ms. Hausen, Ms. Allen, and I couldn't thank Mr. Moran enough. He gives us the green light to do programs like this. Hey, Joe, do what you do. Thanks, Mr. Moran, for doing that. I appreciate it very much. So please scan the website before you leave. We're also on the district website on the mental health, our task force website. The task force will stay here for questions if you want to come up and ask us some questions. But please visit tables before you leave. Get trained in Narcan. Have a great night and be safe, everybody. Thanks for being here.